If you want to go from your emotions controlling you to you being able to control your emotions, there's one thing that you have to have, and that is emotional mastery. But in order to do that, you have to be aware of when these emotions are coming up and that you are not actually in your power. The emotions are controlling you and have power over you. You want to be able to be aware of what's happening. And then also, when not so easy situations come up, you can still keep your cool and you can still be mastered in your emotions. If we don't do this, it prevents us from showing up in the most aligned way that we possibly can be in, which is our most empowered self. When we have emotional mastery, we can be open to so much more that's going on in the situation. Maybe there's something for us to learn there. Maybe there's a pattern to be broken. Maybe there's some awareness that is trying to teach us. But when our emotions are high, our intelligence is low. And so we're unable to really assess the situation of what's happening. And we stay repeating a cycle over and over and over again, not figuring out why we're reacting to a certain situation when maybe it's not even about the situation. However, you're not going to be able to take away these reflections if you're not in your power when it comes to your emotions. This could be the precise moment where you can start expanding into knowing more about a particular topic or a particular area, and perhaps even about emotional mastery. A lot of people really do not understand this concept, and I really want to explain it to you today. I created this channel because I wanted women to step into their wealth unapologetically. I wanted them to become the master of their emotions so that they could be the most powerful version of themselves to create whatever reality they want out there. So if you're ready to claim this too, hit the like button, subscribe, and then also hit the bell so you can be notified when I'm releasing a new video. Our emotions are the number one thing that allow us to feel into a reality that we want to create. Our emotions actually create the vibration and the frequency to attract what we want into our lives. And our emotions are so much more powerful than we actually even realize. So when we have power over it, we get in alignment with the things that we want to manifest and then show up in our reality. Master our emotions doesn't mean we bypass it or we freeze up or we ignore it or let it just build up inside of us. But it's being able to process these emotions, being able to allow ourselves to feel what we're feeling in a very powerful way. So we are responding from a desired place instead of from an impulsive place. We need to honor emotions so we can figure out exactly, why this is happening. We don't bypass them. We lean into figuring out what is that, thing that's triggering us? Like what's making us feel this way? And then when we have understanding for that, then we can figure out why we're reacting instead of responding to a situation. And when we can do that, then we have more power. And then we can figure out, what is exactly triggering us. Because when something's triggering you, it's showing you a place inside of you that's unhealed and it's still not where you're in your power. And it's usually when we are in our victimness or when we are in our lack. So that affects our money. So we want to figure out why these triggers are happening, how we are reacting to these emotions. Very, very important. The reason why we react instead of respond is because it's a protection mechanism. We do it just to block ourselves. Like, when you were little and, something was hot, like the iron or the stove, hot. Well, something happened that created that trigger. So an emotional experience situation where your nervous system or, you were like, oh, I never want to feel that again. So I'm going to put up a shield and I'm going to protect myself for that never happening again. So when something slightly or remotely, is happening to trigger that emotional response, and it might not even be a true emotional response. It might be something that's not even felt all the way through, but it's like the part, let's don't do this. So you go into protective mode, right? So that is really, really important because when we can find that out, we can get to the root of it so that that can stop controlling us and we can control it. And this usually comes from a dysregulated nervous system. Like I said before, something happened that created some sort of trauma in us. And we now are trying to protect ourselves from feeling that way again, right? So our nervous system gets dysregulated and our nervous system has so many different layers, but it comes into our fight and flight responses. Like, oh, I don't want that to happen again. When you have a dysregulated nervous system, you're going to be reacting instead of responding because you're going to be putting yourself in a protection mode. And this is why people are called hotheads, or you see someone getting so upset when they're driving, or people get upset over the littlest things and you're like, hey, what's going on? I just said hello, but you're getting someone's coming on you, or maybe you're the person that's given someone a little extra and they've never met you before, These are when we are not in our power. And when we can identify a trigger, then we can realize that it's not something that's actually threatening or hurting us currently. It's from some previous experience that we had before. But when we turn off our ability to decipher between the reacting and responding, we put ourselves in situations that are not actually beneficial to us because we step back into a pattern experience, which keeps us stuck and in that loop over and over again, and we can't get out. So we put ourselves in positions that we don't necessarily want to be in, toxic relationships or situations with money, things that aren't allowing us to be our most powerful version. The more we can process our emotions and be able to feel into a certain level of pain and hurt or things that, you know, we can feel through, we then allow ourselves to find the safety in that emotion so that when it happens again, we're not going to be so ready to stop an experience or an opportunity or whatever it is from us feeling it. We'll have the capacity to feel it and it be okay because emotions are fleeting. One minute you're upset and then, a couple of minutes later you're fine, or a couple of days later you're fine, or you forgot about what you were upset about last week, because we are not our emotions, but we act like we are because we feel like they're there forever. But if we keep repeating a pattern, they do show up that way. So when we're able to process our emotions, we can get the lesson from it. We can figure out, okay, why is this happening? What is it here to teach me? And this is where we go from things are happening for me and not to me. This is when we change the narrative where we're not like, oh my gosh, this always happens to me. Or, if they just didn't do that, I wouldn't experience this. We start taking accountability for ourselves and our situations, and we then become the powerful narrator and creator of our lives because now we're in control and we're taking that accountability. Like, hey, if I'm the problem, I could be also the solution too, right here, right? So when you see someone in their emotions and reacting towards you, you then have the discretion whether or not you're going to take that personal or not. A lot of the times people take everything personal. They make everything about them because they don't have emotional mastery. When you have emotional mastery, you realize that not everything is about you and it doesn't have to be. And you don't want it to be because you don't want to take on other people's problems. You don't want to take on other people's, emotions because they're seeing life through a certain lens of experiences, right? Unhealed stuff, their triggers, that's a them thing. So then you can decide, you know what? So and so is having a thing over there. That has nothing to do with me. I don't have to get involved. And even if they yelled at me, I realize that it's still not my problem. It's a them thing. This is one of the most powerful things you can do when you don't make it about you. Like a couple years ago, I made a post about, this is the beginning of my awakening. I made a post about certain friends I felt were, kind of fake and I shouldn't have probably been hanging out with them. And I realized that I've outgrown them. They always talk about everybody behind their backs. And I was having like a fresh moment. Something had happened with a friend, but it wasn't a particular friend. I wasn't naming them out. But guess what happened? 3 people defriended me at that time because I saw. So 3 people who were in my life thought I was talking about them. What does that tell you? They made my post about them. But the 3 people that defriended me, it wasn't even about any one of them. But that spoke volumes because they took on that they were playing a role in my post. I got to the point where I was like, do I even go message them and say, hey, this wasn't about you? Or do I just feel like they walked themselves out the door and just be done with it and leave it at that? Because I truly believe if they were really a good friend of mine, they would have came up to me and said, hey, what's going on? Let's talk about this. Instead, they took the post, they took it personal, and they walked themselves out the door. So guess what? Sayonara. I had enough emotional mastery at that point to be able to discern the situation, not take it personal and be like, well, they defriended me, they don't like me anymore, but realize that it had more to do about them than it had to do about me. And if we could do that about so many situations, we would leave so much room for our growth instead of us trying to navigate all of these emotional reactions that really aren't serving us and putting us in our power. I do hold a little extra space for some people's behaviors. I'm not totally lenient on it, but especially when it comes to clients and I see them reacting and they haven't done their work yet, they're still got work to do to a certain degree, because at some point you have to take responsibility for things. But I will make some room for that, because they are growing in my space. But if they're getting into the blame and getting back into their victimness, then that's a them thing and then they've got to go. But there's certain people that that's just where they are in their journey. And I'm not saying that I excuse bad behavior, but I sometimes will be like, you know what? They're still getting their legs, their walking legs, their sea legs. That what it is? They're still getting their sea legs. Their emotional sea legs. Let me just give them a little more space to grow on this, and let's see how things go. Because it comes to a point where if they're not progressing, then, you know, you don't want to keep these people in your life. I noticed that I used to be a hothead. I was somebody who was very reactive. I took everything personal. It was like, oh, she's talking about me. I used to be that person years ago. I realized that I had no capacity actually to process my emotions. All I knew, and I was actually really proud about this, is to stuff my emotions and just to push them down and not feel them, because I thought if I didn't feel them, if I was cold, then what I was really doing was just removing them from me having to deal with them. But what I, but that's not true. They don't just go away because I ignore them. That's called bypassing, right? They're simmering under there and they're actually boiling. And the reason why we trigger is because we have not worked through the anger that's on the top layer of it. So that's not emotional mastery. That's reacting, right? So the trigger come along, someone cut me off, or somebody said something, or someone did something, and this big explosion. And then we take everything personal. And then every experience that's happened since that initial moment that made me feel that way, made you feel that way. We've had experiences along the way. They're just like scar tissue on top of that emotion over and over and over again. So if somebody comes along, maybe innocent, maybe not, does something, triggers you, they get not just that moment, but they get the moment before, that, maybe decades worth of stuff, just like on top of them. And then they're like, whoa, all I did was ask you, are you hungry? And then you gave them extra. This is what happens in relationships, why the toxic cycle goes along. This happens with money, in our relationship with money. This is something that when you understand how to really master your emotions, you can create whatever you want. So I saw that I was not mastered on my emotions. I saw that was very reactory. I saw that I had a lot of triggers. So I created this program called Accessing the Quantum through Emotional Self-Mastery. And I talked about it in my book. I talk a bit about it in my book, Unlocking the Quantum Woman, because I feel like many of us grew up without being taught to master emotions. In fact, we were told, hey, don't cry, Susie. Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. No one ever came up to us and said, how are you feeling? It's okay to be sad right now. It's okay to feel your emotions. In fact, we were probably gaslit for our emotions. Why are you crying? I'm going to give you something to cry about. I mean, I don't know if any of you heard that. I did. Let me give you something to cry about. What are you crying about over there? And I was an empath, so I cried a lot. What you did, you crybaby. I was called a crybaby from people who didn't understand that it was important that you learn to embrace your emotions, because our parents and their parents, they didn't know how to handle emotions. So they just wanted you to stop crying. Don't cry. So then you put a binky in someone's mouth. I didn't do that with my kids though. I taught my kids how to soothe themselves, but no judgment. I just didn't want them to be relying on something else for the rest of their life. I wanted them to have the power within themselves about how to master emotions. And they're both emotionally mastered teenagers, soon to be in their 20s. They know how to do this, and they have healthy relationships with, their significant other and with money. So it's so important that we understand this. So I created ETQ. This is short form for Accessing the Quantum through Emotional Self-Mastery. We figure out, why don't we know the difference between desires and goals? We don't know how to receive correctly. This is one of the things, because our hearts are so blocked. We block our hearts off, and we don't have the capacity to receive because we're usually in survival mode, or we're in that wounded masculine state, same thing, where we're just getting things done instead of feeling into what we want. And that's that feminine energy I talk about. But that's the most important thing with mastering our emotions. If you are not tapped into your emotions, you're not connected to yourself. And if you're not connected to yourself, guess what? You're not really creating the life of your dreams. Our subconscious is run from our emotional state. And if we are not feeling our emotions freely, all of them, then our ability to create exactly what we want, receive as much money as we want, be able to go into that next empowered version of ourselves that we, desire, it is so much harder because we have not mastered our emotions. I have not heard anybody coin this, a master your emotions, emotional mastery. I created it because I realized that I was not the master of my emotions. I realized that my emotions were mastering me. I had control over me. So then I worked on triggers, and I worked on, how do we really identify our triggers? Where did they come from? Go back to our childhood. Where did this come from? Why do we get so upset about things? I know when I get upset and I go into not the most mastered place emotionally, where I I'm having a response and I don't feel like I've processed it all the way through, I wait. I allow myself to wait a minute. Let myself get upset right now. I never used to do that before, but let myself get upset, feel the emotions I'm feeling, and then process it out and then make a, then I take action on it. So I don't message people right now if I'm in an emotion. I don't take any action until I've felt the emotion all the way through. And then I take process, unless it's something that has to be immediately addressed. It's something in my business, you know, if someone's done something, I'm like, I'm on it. I'll take care of it. There's some exceptions to the rule. Now, when it's definitely within personal relationships or even how you're running your team and whatnot, those are things that you really should take a minute and go, let me breathe. Let me feel this all the way through. I'm not telling you not to get angry, because I'm telling you need to feel it all the way through. Because when you feel that emotion all the way through, you're actually becoming so much more emotionally mastered. And a lot of people can't. They need the help of a therapist or someone else or a program to help them feel into that emotion, feel safe when they're going through it. Because a lot of times people are still frozen in time when it comes to how they're feeling. So in my book, I go through all the things, the steps of being able to move through your emotions. And the program Accessing the Quantum through Emotional Self Mastery, I give you, I think it's 13 or 14 modules, plus we've got 4 Q&As in there that give you a step-by-step process of what you need to do for you to go effectively change your life. You take that in the book and you become one of the most emotionally mastered versions of yourself, which will then take you out of any lack and scarcity, really, and put you into a most empowered place. Now, there's a caveat. This comes with layers. I've had clients that have gone through the program a couple of times, because every time you go back and you read a book that's shifted you, you're going to get to a new level of consciousness. So keep that in mind. Every time you go through it, new level of consciousness, new level of awareness, more of that onion peeling back. And, people say, I've done so much work. Why is there still more? Because we are in layers. We are multidimensional beings. We have decades, years and decades lined up of things that we've experienced. Because if you wake up every single day of your life with the unresolved emotions inside of yourself and you are reacting instead of responding, you have a lot to unwind. But if you get to the root, you can go phew, and then let the rest go. And that's what I want to do for you. So go grab the book. You could go sign up for a program, Accessing the Quantum through Emotional Self Mastery. Or you can come visit us in Chicago on October 25th and 26th. We're going to go a deep dive into this, because wealth consciousness is all dependent on our current consciousness. So if you can awaken more of your consciousness, which is what emotional mastery is, bringing that awareness to you, you can then quantum leap into your future version of yourself. So I hope to see you there in Chicago on October 25th and 26th. And don't forget to join our Quantum Woman group on Facebook and go listen to Unapologetically Rich, our podcast. Go subscribe. And I would love reviews from all of you guys. And thank you so much for listening. I hope this gave you some awareness. I'll be talking about it more because I am the queen of this. And I've been teaching it to thousands and thousands of women and a few men on it. And it literally changes your life and your business, because you are the blueprint for your life and business. So when you are emotionally mastered, your business and your life is as well. And that just leaves room for you to evolve and grow into your most elevated, upgraded, empowered version of who you are. All right. Stay tuned for the next video. Bye for now.